Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am here to read the story of Eternally Mine. This was a story that I wrote for my Wattpad, and a lot of you had reached out to me asking if I would do an audio. So here I am. This is a story of Mai Thao and Bua, and I hope that you will enjoy the story with me.
Nothing ever felt as good or as easy as when we were young. Though I felt misunderstood, it was a pleasure running away with you. We were just children acting like a doll, crazy, naive, bold and carefree. We were kids having kids.
I grew up in the same household as my 3 older sisters and 2 brothers. I was the youngest of the children and the most spoiled, my siblings claimed. My mother, Blia, who had been married at a very young age and began popping babies out every other year, would call me a sentimental fool when it came to love. I wanted the big romance type where the man picked me up from the ground and swung me around. I hardly ever saw this in the small White River village I lived in. All the men in this village walked ahead, and the women walked behind them with their heads bent down low. My 3 older sisters married in town, and I witnessed them become just like the rest over the years they'd married. Mai Thao, stop daydreaming. Come help me. My mother's voice shouted from the back of the hut. I set down the embroidery I was supposed to be working on and walked around to find her digging through the dried herbs on the table. She was a medicinal herbalist, and everyone in town came to her for help. But no matter how talented she was, she couldn't help her own daughters become pregnant. Yes, Mother? I asked. Take these 3 bags and bring them to each of your sisters. She handed me 3 small bags filled with herbs that looked like discarded tree skins. I eyed them with curiosity and smirked. Really? Are these supposed to help them conceive? I asked. She ignored me as she continued moving her herbs about. Just do as I ask, then come straight home. And don't go wandering. I need to tell you something important tonight. I almost rolled my eyes as I headed back to the main road and began walking toward the end of the town. The many bachelors in town winked at me as I walked past their huts. They were such flirts, and I was barely interested. My maidenhood would be given to a man I loved, not a man arranged by the hands of my parents. I saw the suffering my sisters went through as they were forced to give up their lives for men who treated them like dirt. And to be walking a path of infertility and feeling the wrath of gossip at every corner they lingered in. I reached the first house on the left side, near the forked road that led to the cemetery path where my oldest sister Baku lived with her husband Jong and his parents. Jong was the oldest son and had a lot of responsibilities, and I watched my poor sister break her back since marriage a few years ago. She'd aged more so than ever and became bitter. Baku, are you home? I called out. I saw a few chickens run out from behind the hut, and then Jong came out with the basket he'd been weaving together. Oh, hello, Sister Mai Thao. Your sister is not home. She's at the garden shed. Of course she was, I thought, as I walked to the gates he'd built with his own 2 hands. Oh, well, can you give these herbs to her? It's from my mother. He took them from me and turned back home, muttering, Tell your mom thanks. How rude, I thought as I made my way opposite to the other end, where I delivered the herbs to my second oldest sister, Mai Thao, who was sitting at the front of the house breaking kernels from corn. She and I used to fight like cat and dogs, but since she married, she'd lost the shine in her eyes. Mai Thao, I called out. She looked up at me and gave me a weak smile. What are you doing here? Just working on these corn. What are you doing? I handed her the bag of herbs. It's from Mom. She asked me to bring this to you to help you. I know. She interrupted me. I know. Tell her thanks for me. Go on home, Mai Thao. Go on home. She lowered her eyes and continued working, and I knew it was my cue to leave. It meant that she didn't want her husband to know I'd been to visit her. I felt my heart break as I stepped away and looked over my shoulder at her. She was bent down, working like a slave, as I walked off. The next house on the other side of the river was my third oldest sister, Pua, who was married to the town clan leader's son. She had an even worse life because everything she did and did not do was talked about. When I arrived, she was hanging clothes out in the backyard, and when I called her name, she smiled at me and walked toward me. "Mai Thao, what are you doing here?" she asked. "I'm here to deliver you some herbs that Mom gave." "Here," I said as I handed it to her. She took them, but her eyes lingered a bit on me before she lowered her face. I took her hands in mine and gave them a shake. "Best wishes to you, big sis. I hope you have a fat, plump baby this year," I cried. Her eyes shined with tears. "Go on home, you." I did as I was told, and as I walked back, I thought about how sad all three of my sisters had become. They used to be such shining beacons of light, and they would speak their minds carelessly. Now, I'd give anything to have them fight verbally with me again. I would never hear their voices now as a married woman. As I made my way home, I noticed that a party of 10 had just left my home. Their backs were turned to me, so I didn't see their faces, and I wondered what they were doing here. I hurried inside the home and found my father, Tanjoa, smoking a pipe by the fire of the hearth. He had his arms crossed, and I looked to where my mother was cutting some green onions for dinner. "Mama, who were those people?" I asked. "Talk to your daughter," my father said as he got up and left. She finished cutting the onions and then grabbed a bucket of corn and spilled them on the floor, taking one to break the kernel off. "Mama," I asked again. "Sit down," she said without looking at me. I took a seat, and she finally looked up at me. "That was the wedding negotiators for your wedding." I felt as if someone had punched me in the face. The palms of my hand got sweaty, and I wanted to laugh at first until I saw the seriousness of my mother's face. "You're joking with me, right?" "Why would anyone joke about this?" "Mama, I don't want to marry him. I don't even know him. He's a stranger. How do you expect me to give myself to him when I've never even met him?" The faded floor skirt she wore had tiny holes where ants had made their home for a few times when hung outside to dry. She didn't look at me when she answered. "You don't have a choice. Just be glad that someone who can pay for you is going to marry you. And that is going to make everything okay, just because he can pay for me. That's not fair." She smirked and chuckled lightly. "Who says life is fair? It's a battle you will learn how to win to be favored every single day. It's never ending. The life of a daughter to Nya, to death, it's rotten and decays your inside more than you know." I felt tears prick the back of my eyes. "Then why are you forcing me to follow your footsteps?" She finally looked up at me, her eyes a darkening glare that threatened to tell the truth, to hurt me yet at the same time wanting to do nothing but to shield me. Then I saw the glistening of tears, and she shrugged her thin shoulders lightly as she used a corner of her blouse to wipe her tears. Clearing her throat, she replied, "What good will it do if you were to make your own fate? In the end, you would just be trampled upon and spat at by the same people who did to me. Might as well make you follow the same steps so you won't be blamed anywhere else in the world." I reached out suddenly and took her hands, the kernels falling from her fingers, rolling onto the earth in a silent rush. It was then that I noticed her lower lip trembling and the tears that were streaming down her face. "Mama," I whispered. She looked up at me with hooded eyes and pulled her hand back immediately. "Just be a good girl and marry the man like your father says. Whatever you do, stay away from the river. It has things that can harm you. If you don't believe me, just look at your older sisters. Years of marriage and not a single child to hold. Stay away." She stood up and walked out the back door. I heard her muffled sobs, and I knew that no matter what I said, she wouldn't tell me her true feelings. She would bury them as she was taught centuries ago by her own mother, who had the same fate. Mama, my mama, was always a quiet woman with too much hidden inside of her. She was like opening a book, and the dog-eared corners would tell you what was important. The rest was basically just there to tell its tale with too much words and nothing important. That was my mama, and she often hid her talent because she was afraid of being too bold in front of my father. I watched her lower her standards, hide her voice, and shield her strength, all because she was taught to let her man be the warrior in the relationship. She was to be obedient and mute. I used to hate her because I thought she was weak, until I was put into her same exact shoes, and I was forced to follow my strength, to glue my eyes shut from things around me, and to simply obey. I couldn't fight with my father because he was too stubborn to even glance at me, and my mother, she already gave in to everything, so there was no point. Whatever you do, stay away from the river. It has things that can harm you. If you don't believe me, look at your older sisters. Years of marriage and not a single child to hold. Stay away. This was the phrase she kept repeating to me since the marriage arrangement was made. What did it matter if I could birth a child or not, if I didn't love the man chosen to be my husband? I didn't want to end up like my sisters, forever bowing my head behind my husband and forgetting I had a voice. I shoved at the tears brimming at my eyes and hated the fact that I was now going to be walking the same exact path my sisters had. A sound behind me disturbed me, and I found my sister Pua making her way to join me in the evening sunset. "Are you here to poke fun at me?" I asked. She smiled. "Why would I do that? Seeing as how I would be joining you in the eternity suffering of an arranged marriage, it seems most likely that is why you're here." Pua's smile faded, and then her eyes brimmed with tears. "You know, baby sister, I had hoped you would be able to escape that route, but it seems that if you're born wearing a skirt, you're bound to join the pack sooner or later. There were so many bachelors in town. Why didn't you give any of them a chance and save yourself this pain?" I wanted to laugh. I don't know what's worse, just choosing a random man to wed or being forced to wed one not of your choice. It seems either one ends up with me being slapped with the pain of forgetting my true colors. Tell me, Pua, why must I endure this after my own mother and sisters are all true representations of misery of this same path, huh? I hope to one day find that answer myself. Right now, all I can do is just simply hold my breath every day and wish that it would end well and not with me hearing another round of gossip about myself. I saw how her lower lip trembled, and I felt sorry for all the things she'd been through. I swallowed down the lump in my throat, and I reached out a hand to hold hers. She looked up at me, giving me a strange look. "What?" she asked, confused. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry for not trying hard enough to love you when I could. Now it seems as if all of this is so far away from me. You and my other sisters, our relationship broken by a title slapped on us to carry. I'm not proud of how I acted when you were forced to marry. I am now walking in your own very footsteps." She lowered her gaze and smiled weakly. What would you know, except to think I was a simpleton? I was always so outspoken, so full of life and jubilee, and then suddenly I lost my strength and colors and became a ragged old woman whose heart was trampled upon by lies and gossip so much so that she molded herself into a quiet little mute woman. I never expected myself to be this way either, Mai Thao, but the worst part is that I refuse to do anything about it because of the shame I would bring to myself. So I rather endure and just pretend I am okay so that I can have a place to die properly in. I threw my arms around her, my heart hammering with ache and injustice. It's so unfair. I can't believe we have to go through this and not be understood or loved. I'm so scared, Pua. What if my husband doesn't love me? She pulled away and looked at me gently with eyes that held the same tear in my own heart. Then you'll be walking the same steps Mom and the rest of us do. The early morning sun broke through the sky, and the rooster saw it first, crowing at its first peak, waking me from a deep slumber as I turned in my bed. The ray of light decorated the thin curtain with shining particles of dust, and I covered my face with my hands, remembering what the world was waiting for me. I was going to be a bride today, to be wed to a man I had never met, and I would be taken to a house I would have to make a home. What if this man was someone who was scarred? What if he beat me? What if he raped me? What if? So many what ifs running through my mind. Mai Thao, you better get up and wash up. The wedding party is going to arrive soon, and if you want your husband to love you, better make a good first impression. My mother's warning voice called from the open doorway. Good, I thought. Good that I would make him tremble in his shoes, and so he would return me. Did you hear your mother? This came from my father, which made me sit up and push the curtain aside, getting up. Yes, father, I did. I rushed outside and washed my face, pulled my hair into a bun, and changed my clothes into a fresh one from the laundry line. I had just finished when I heard my father's voice greeting people. My feet stopped walking, and I felt as if my shoulders weighed 1,000 pounds. A deep voice replied to my father in a kind and respectful manner. Was that him? I peeked out from the door and saw that there were 6 men standing in the room with my father, and a woman who I assumed was a green lady, the conversation merry and light as my mother smiled at everyone. I bit my lower lip and my heart sank in my chest. This wasn't what I expected to wake up to. Quite a wake-up call, huh? I jumped and turned around so quickly that I nearly lost my footing. Standing before me was a handsome man whose onyx eyes were so bright that it sent a shiver down my back. His hair, a longer length than most, lingered over one eyebrow, and his smile that appeared on his face mesmerized me. He was wearing a black long-sleeved shirt with a pair of black pants, making him appear so mysterious. You are? I asked. Smiling, he replied, Oh, I'm so sorry to have not introduced myself. I'm the groom. He winked at me and then left, leaving me feeling unsteady on my feet. The groom? He was the groom? As in the man who was going to marry me? It took a moment to catch my breath before I could feel my mind race again with words and thought. My mother came looking for me and grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the room where my father was standing in. Here she is, our daughter, Mai Thao, she said as she introduced me. This here is your green lady, Sia, and this here, she said as she turned to take the arm of the man who had introduced himself as a groom earlier. This here is your husband-to-be, Boa. I felt my throat turn dry as he gave me that same dark glare again. I lowered my gaze, unable to speak, and I heard my mother's nervous chuckle. Forgive her, my mother said. She's usually quite talkative, but today it seems the cat has got her tongue. I felt the tears prick my eyes as I thought about my mother's choice of words. I just walked out of the room, and I heard Boa's voice tell my green lady to follow me. Shortly after, the woman called Sia appeared behind me. Yeah, I hope you won't mind me. It's just traditions, she explained. I didn't answer her. My cousin Boa is a wonderful man, really. You're very lucky. So many women who heard he was going to get married were heartbroken. I didn't answer her as I just stared out into the open sky where the clouds seemed to laugh at me. The wind picked up and blew across my hair. As I stood there, I shut my eyes and I let in a few deep breaths. You claim so many women are heartbroken over your cousin's wedding. Why didn't he choose them to marry? Why did he choose me? I asked. Perhaps, came Boa's voice as my eyes opened wide, I didn't want any of them and wanted only you. Did you ever think of that? I stepped away from him, searching for Sia and finding that she disappeared as soon as he came. Why would you want me? You and I have never met. You've never met me, no. But I've met you plenty of times. Frowning, I asked, Where? He smiled and crossed his arms. From the walk home of your garden shed, where the sun hits across your cheeks and makes your eyes glitter like gold. From the ball-tossing field where your coins jingle with your waist as you walk, and your smile makes my heart become warm. From the market where you walk with glee, unnoticed that men of all types look after the trail you leave behind. From the corner of my eyes as you apologize gently when our shoulders touch in a crowd. From the watering hole where you effortlessly carry a bucket home on your back. From the corners of my heart where your image forever lays embedded like a timeless stamp. I felt my knees buckle, and I moved away from him. How could you have seen me so many times and I haven't recognized you? Maybe I have only seen you, and you have not seen me, for I am not the one you seek. That gives you the right to pluck me to be your wife, without my permission, without my heart. Shrugging, he replied, I didn't steal you from anywhere. I'm here with a wedding party to lay gentle terms and promises of love. I could have stolen you anywhere at any given time, but I didn't I? You must give me some credit for that part. Laughing, I replied, You think you're really smart, don't you? Only around certain people. Others bring out the brute in me. He winked at me again and turned to leave as Sia made her way back to my side, her cheeks flushed. The evening sun fell into the hills of the horizon, and people began gathering into the small hut of my parents. I was sitting in the corner, my hands locked together in a prayer mode, and my heart breaking at every single congratulations handed to me. I wasn't content with the situation, and I wanted nothing more than to jump to my own demise. I wanted to disappear from here and never be discovered again. My sisters came, their lips locked in a fake smile at people as their husbands exchanged words with strangers I would soon call family. My father was smoking his pipe, a grin on his face as he nodded to people telling him how lucky he was. My mother's face was locked in a frozen state of forgetfulness as she walked through the crowd and tried to prepare everything for the wedding. Mai Thao. I looked up, and I saw a few bachelors who had flirted with me from time to time walking toward me. As soon as they came closer, Sia moved in front of me and blocked their path. What words do you wish to send to Mai Nya? I'd be more than happy to relay the message to her. The first man, whose name I'd forgotten, smiled at us and then he crossed his arms. Why would I need you to pass on my message? She's sitting right there. I'll just talk to her, so if you step aside, I'd appreciate it. And I'd appreciate it if you stepped away from my wife. My head turned as Boa came walking toward us, and his hand reached out to take me, pulling me to a standing position. He pulled me toward him and placed his hand around my waist, keeping me locked to his side. The man who spoke, his face broken into regret, stepped back a few inches. Sure, whatever you say. I guess it's too late for us, huh, Mai Thao? He asked. I'd appreciate it if you directed your questions toward me, Boa said. The man simply sneered and walked away as his friends followed him. Then my husband turned to me and took my hand, leading me out the back door as everyone watched us. I felt as if I had grown 3 horns on my head, and the heated glare my own mother gave me was enough to start a fire to burn 3 acres of land. Once we were outside, I removed my hand from his and stepped away from him. Who is he? Boa asked. I don't know. He smiled and crossed his arms. We're alone now, wife, you can be honest. Was he a suitor you had in mind? No. Why would you assume so? He speaks as if he knows you. Quite well, in fact. Shrugging, I turned away and replied, Perhaps he does, and perhaps he doesn't. I guess it's for me to know and for you to never find out. He dropped his arms and came to me, pushing me against the banana tree. The leaves crushed around me as I almost lost my balance. He pulled me to his arms, holding me in place, as he tilted my chin up to look into his bleak stare. Don't ever say that again, Mai Thao. Do you understand the heavy punishment I could give you if you were to speak like that? I smiled. What is it then? A smack in the face? A broken rib? Hair-cutting ceremony? His eyes darkened and he frowned suddenly, and it didn't make me feel better as I had hoped. What kind of man do you think I am? I don't know, I whispered. What kind are you? To kidnap someone and marry her as if she belongs to you? Do you think I want you? Do you think I'd give myself to you openly just because you paid for me? You have lost your mind, Boa. I am not an imbecile like my sisters. I don't cower down to a man and walk behind him as if I'm a slave. I'm not obedient, I'm not submissive, and I surely am not going to bend over backwards for you. This is me, and this is going to be the wife you will be presenting to the world. He stepped back from me and gave me a ghost of a smile. You have made up a huge idea of who I am when you have no clue at all. You believe me to be wicked and would be a wife-beater, don't you? Why not? All the men are, as soon as they take away the maidenhood of their bride and stain the bed bloody with her virgin blood. She becomes his to do what he pleases, and she's left to become an old hag. Laughing, he replied, You're comical, Mai Thao. It will be interesting to live a life with you. If you're speaking such horrid ideas like this to get me to step back from announcing myself as your groom, you have another thing coming, dear wife. I don't give in as easily to the things I want. I want you. From the moment I set eyes on you, I wanted you. And I'll want you until these eyes lose colors and image. In fact, I'll never stop wanting you. And if you think I'm going to give up because you sneer a bit too much, well, enjoy the party with me, sweetheart. Because it's not going to be easy to rid of me once I have decided who I will brand. He took my hand and pulled me toward him, violently making me yelp. You're mine. No one takes what is mine. No one touches what is mine. And no one will ever claim what is mine. From the ends of the earth I will walk to claim you, and to the edges of the heaven I will travel to bring you home. You are mine.
Maybe I'm a bird, following the seasons. This is what I've learned. I'm different for a reason. Kept the engine on, never stay too long. I'm alright, I don't mind being restless. Something in your eye made me stay all night. I can see you are different.
The encounter with my husband left me shaking like a leaf as I came back to the crowded room where the wedding guests were conversing. From the corner of my eyes, I could see Bua glancing at me, and I turned away, unable to watch him. His warning of being his lingered through my mind, causing me to twitch lightly. No one had ever said anything like that to me before, and he was still a complete stranger with only a title as a husband. The feeling of being owned made me fume suddenly, and I gritted my teeth. What right did he have to say such things? Even if he was my husband, he had no right. Mai Thao, you have become an imbecile. I turned away and began walking out the door when Sia followed me behind. I stopped and glared at her. I'm going to go relieve myself. Fine, I'll go with you, she replied. No. Does tradition require that, or is it Bua's instructions? Her face softened and she smiled. Yeah, look, I know that you don't like my cousin, and this is your way of relieving your anger. But please, don't make things hard on me. I'm simply following traditions of what a green lady does. Wherever the bride goes, I go, to help make sure your spiritual soul is not going to be lured away by anyone. I laughed. Do you see my spiritual soul lingering anywhere to be taken away? I shut my eyes and realized how ugly I'd become. I took a deep breath and ran my hands over my face. I'm sorry, Sia, you didn't deserve that. Fine, come along. I wasn't really gonna go relieve myself, I just wanted to get away. But now that she was following me, I ended up finding a small patch of grass to do my business. As I came back out and walked to the barrel of rainwater to wash my hands, I heard someone call out Sia's name. She didn't move, and when her name was called a second time, I cleared my throat to get her attention, but she stood her ground. Someone is calling you, I said. No, Nya, someone is trying to lure me away. I'm not stupid. I know exactly what is going on. Hurry up and wash your hands so we can go inside. This girl could not be fooled. I finished, and the two of us walked back inside, and I saw the young man who had tried to start a conversation with me earlier standing in a nearby corner, his eyes never leaving mine. For the life of me, I couldn't remember his name. Fong? Dang? I ignored his heated glare, and I wondered why he was here. We hadn't really had anything going on, but I suppose now that he realized I was spoken for, the idea made him want me. Was that it? Wanting something he couldn't have? How unattractive. That single thought made me turn away from him quickly, and my mother grabbed my arm, pulling me into the bedroom where she had the wedding attire laid out. Sia closed the door behind us and came to settle in the corner as my mother began to arrange the clothing. "Mama," I said, "tell me to stay with you." Sia looked up at me, and then she stood up suddenly. "I'm going to check on the food." She left us alone, and I thanked her kind soul for really understanding my heart without speaking a single word. My mother didn't look at me. Instead, she continued to fix the clothes that didn't need fixing on the bed. "Mama, did you ever love me?" I asked, with tears brewing in my eyes. Finally, she looked up at me with sad eyes, and her lips trembled lightly. "What is love, when I know that you are not mine to keep? You would be walking the same path I would once you reached a certain age. Why do you think I kept my heart closed all these years? I don't want to have to endure the empty space that used to be your presence. Just let me dress you properly for your wedding, and once you are out of my sight, I can mourn quietly." I threw my arms around her and held her, my hot tears streaming down my face, my heart hammering wildly in my chest as I shut my eyes and the sobs tore at me. "Why, Mama? Why must I walk the same path? I want to stay with you." "You can't," she whispered softly. "What kind of mother would I be if I were to hold you down? I gave birth to you, but I knew the moment I held you in my arms that you wouldn't belong to me. You would belong to someone else and die calling another mama, while I would be the guest whose name would call out to ask you to visit once again. It was my job, my duty bestowed upon me when I birthed a daughter. I would welcome my own daughter-in-law with open arms, and she would come to replace you. Mama, please don't give me away." "I must. Your father has agreed to everything laid on the table. The money has been collected, and they're already making dinner as we speak. Once this wedding attire cloaks your body, you are a wife, and will carry the title of a married woman. My hands will remove the striped ribbon from your turban, letting the world know that maiden you are no more, and wife you have become." I shook my head as I began shaking. "No, Mama, you can't do that to me. I don't love him, and I don't want him. Let me stay with you." She sobbed and pulled away as she wiped my eyes gently. I gazed into her eyes for the first time, saw the truth of her fear and pain swimming in her. She'd lived this pain so many times with each one of her daughters, yet me being the last one she'd give away, it was like giving away her lifeline. Her pretty face broke into a pained expression, and she took my hand, placing it on her cheek. "What I'd give to hold onto you forever, my daughter, and let you brush my hair and inhale your scent every day. But as my mother once gave me away, I should do the same to you as you would with yours. Remember this moment, how I am right now, because one day you will be wearing my shoes, and a daughter whose eyes look like your husband's will share the same pain you feel." I broke down and shook my head. "No, Mama, I don't want to go. I'll bear the shame. I'll do it because I love you. And because I love you, I can't let you bear that shame. You're too good. I trust that this man, this husband, will love you the way you should be loved." She removed her hands and picked up the colorful sleeve shirt. She reached to put it around me, and I backed away. "No, I won't wear it." "Mai Thao, don't make this hard on me. Come, let me dress you." "No!" I cried. "I won't wear it!" The door opened suddenly, and in stepped my husband with Sia. My voice lodged into the depths of my throat, and I backed away into the corner as Sia closed the door. "Son-in-law, what manner brings you here?" my mother asked. Boa smiled gently at my mother, and then his eyes turned to me. "I'm here to make sure my wife will wear her wedding clothes. If she refuses, Mother, I can certainly help dress her. I'm sure if it's my hands that puts it on her, she won't refuse." It was then that I realized he'd been listening at the door and heard everything I'd said. I lowered my gaze as my mother turned to me. "Mai Thao, come," she whispered softly. "Only if he leaves," I replied. "Will you behave?" he asked as if I was a child. When I didn't answer, he smirked and opened the door, walking out as I let out a sob. My mother took my arm and pulled me toward her where she started dressing me. Each button she collapsed, my heart sunk. Each wrap of the sash around my waist, my tears fell. I didn't want to marry him. I didn't love him. I wanted to stay, and as my mother's hand pulled at the striped ribbon around the turban to remove it, I felt my cheeks heavy with tears. That striped ribbon was the indication of a maiden, and now that I would be married, I no longer had the right to wear it. She placed the purple turban on my head and wiped my cheeks. Don't go out there looking like that. No matter what, shield your feelings so no one knows. She then dressed Sia, and the two of us walked out together, where my husband's eyes filled with an emotion of love that did nothing to me. Lectures. The lecture from my many uncles and brothers about what a wife was to do to build a successful marriage with her husband. Never argue on purpose, never pick a fight to be able to sleep alone. Your body now belongs to your husband. All the things I loathe about a wife, I didn't even listen. I just stood there, lifeless as they spoke, and I stared at the ground, my husband beside me, and all the while I wanted to fade into the dark soil that my feet stood on. Let the wedding party go! I shot my head up as I heard this, and as I looked for my mother, my husband took my hand, leading me out of the house. Mama! I cried. I saw her shimmering eyes from the corner as she covered her mouth to keep from sobbing. I turned the opposite from leaving, and I felt my feet lift from the ground. It was then that I realized my husband had picked me up and was carrying me in his arms. Look at me, he whispered. Look only at me. It is bad luck to look back at your parents. As we begin our life together, we look forward only. If you promise to look forward with me, I'll put you down. Otherwise, I will carry you out like this. I promise, I said quickly. He set me down and took my hand, leading me out as I focused my eyes on the path ahead of me. I heard the many well wishes from the crowd, and then I heard my mother's voice. Whatever you do, stay away from the waters, she called out. Love your husband and live well, my daughter. I broke out into a sob, and he steadied me as we walked onward. We stopped for lunch 2 hours later, and I felt as if my back was going to break from the many sashes around my waist. I was tired, and my feet were aching. As I sat down on the ground, my mother's words lingered through me, and her last sad glance got me. The cold chicken wrapped in banana leaves was taken out, and a drumstick was handed to me with rice. I ate it without looking or speaking to anyone. They all knew what I thought of my husband. As I picked the pieces of the chicken flesh to devour, I turned around and realized we stopped at a river, the warning of my mother's voice echoing inside me, but I was filled with hate. A deep hate of having no choice but to wed a man I would never love. A deep hate of having to lay in bed with a man whose body I did not choose. I finished my meal and walked straight into the water's cool wrath and began washing my hands. I walked deeper and deeper until the water hit the back of my knees. The wind was calm up until I felt the water around me. It began to pick up, and I felt a chill down my back. Breathing deeply in, I closed my eyes, feeling the tears consume me, and then I was ripped back violently by my husband. What are you doing? He asked with disdain to his voice. Get back here. And he shoved me to shore where the wedding party glanced at me with inquisitive eyes. I ignored them and sat waiting for everyone to finish before we continued walking again. As we started up the hill, I turned around and looked back at the river. That was when I saw him emerging from the water, a head of long hair and a smile that captivated me to the core. He wore rich tribal clothing that clung to his body and gave me a most intoxicating smile as his dark eyes never lost their hold on me. I tripped, and when I got back on my feet, he was gone and out of sight. Thank you for tuning in. Part 2 will be out shortly.
Nothing ever felt as good or as easy as when we were young. Oh. Though I felt misunderstood, it was a pleasure running away with you. We were just children, acting like a doll, Crazy, naive, bold and carefree. We were kids having kids. Crazy, naive. It amazes me that we didn't fall apart harder than we did. Now they keep us on speaking terms. We grow and we learn. I have no regrets, only forgets. Oh, a big thank you to life for giving us sand. Oh, when the timing's right, there's no wasteland. Oh, we were just children acting like adults.